Good afternoon. How are you? Well, the sun is out. It's a little chilly, but the temperature is 58, so Thomas Jefferson has taken care of it as a baseline. The humidity is 34%, and the winds are 19 miles an hour. And right now, it's as quiet as could be. But if it gets too bad, we'll end on an incomplete note. The notes today are enough is enough. And it's by the judiciary, and it's by two judges, one in Maryland and one in D.C. And the argument goes like this: how far can the government go in disobedience of a court order, and what may the judge do in return? Now, let's start with U.S. District Judge James Boasberg. He's the judge who has had the question of the detainees taken offshore after he issued an order saying that while the temporary restraining order was in place, they shouldn't be doing any such thing. And that has been going on now for several weeks. And the concern, of course, is that they went to the El Salvador hellhole, which they claim is a prison, which is really a place of cruelty and torture and death. I have always thought it's easy to explain to people how our criminal justice system is flawed when we can prove that innocent people were convicted and some executed. It's why when I lecture or write sometimes I say justice is a coincidence of our system, not a consequence of it. Meaning, if it happens, it's almost in defiance of the rules that constrain the process in such a fashion that accuracy and justice are not done. And it's the strongest case to make because there's no argument that a person who's innocent of the crime should be punished at all. And a similar extension of that is if the statutes of our nation passed by Congress and approved by the President and on the books do not allow you to send any person offshore, that is, to kick them out of our country, to banish them, unless our statutes say so, and they don't. Yet the President is saying, yeah, maybe we'll banish people, meaning citizens. This is the ultimate extension in our justice system of injustice. So let's talk about what U.S. District Judge Boasberg faced and how he handled it. And he said, the Constitution does not tolerate willful disobedience of a judicial order. What could be clearer than that? So he's prepared to put the persons in contempt responsible for the defiance of his order, resulting in individuals sitting in a prison in El Salvador. And he is looking at possible contempt. And what he's going to do is he's going to give them a chance, the government, a chance to take a step in the direction of the right course of action, which they've shown no indication so far, or face prosecution for contempt. Now, you should understand that there are actually rules that apply to a contempt involving the court and the judge. And that rule provides that you must first refer the prosecution to the Department of Justice for prosecution. That is not the end of it, and particularly in this case for all the reasons that we know. And I believe the rule is 42. And that rule provides that you first forward the contempt to the Department of Justice, and failing them to act, then the court can appoint his or her own prosecutor. So the court is offering, in the case of those detainees in El Salvador, the opportunity for the government to cure their unconstitutional process, their denial of due process, and to release those who are innocent. Now, how would this work? The way it would work in the following fashion. They would give notice of charges to those in custody and give them an opportunity, this is due process, to be heard, to rebut. And if found not to be proper subjects for being in prison, they have to be returned. Now, the court imagines that if the government does not comply with his orders, then there will be hearings with live witnesses, or perhaps depositions conducted by the plaintiffs, who are basically the prisoners in El Salvador. Now, so you ask DOJ, they fail the test, and then you choose another prosecutor. You choose one, and then that makes all the difference. Now, excuse me, I tried to affect the light, so if you notice anything strange, it wasn't you, it was me. So, the effort by the government is in part in reliance on what they feel the Supreme Court said or did. And the Supreme Court did something interesting. It said two things. One is they confirmed the due process right of the detainees to be found to satisfy a condition that approves of detention. Failing that, they are returned. So the Supreme Court said that. But they said something else. They then stripped the case of the pending remedy and said, going forward, those are the rules. And they invoked an act, the Administrative Procedure Act, which offers an exception to sovereignty, meaning our government considers itself sovereign. It can only be prosecuted in a case, civil or criminal, to the extent that it agrees and grants the opportunity. So the detainees in this case invoked the Administrative Procedure Act for that reason. Now, what did the court do? The Supreme Court said, well, it should have been habeas. And because of that, we don't have to act on that part. Now, Sotomayor wrote a dissent to this and said, to recognize due process was enough and satisfactory of the decision. There was no need to make a ruling about habeas. And the ruling about habeas was for nothing more than to, well, help the government, shall we say. And Kagan, I believe, said that the ruling, insofar as it said they chose the wrong statute or proceeding, they should have done habeas instead of APA, that it was suspect, like everything else in this court. So this kind of weaselly worded way of appearing to make a right decision, that is to say, every detainee has a right to due process, notice of the charges, opportunity to be heard. But we don't think they brought the case in the right place, so they're nowhere. Now, the government intends to bring that up in defense of the contempt proceeding. But the judge has already explained in the contempt proceeding that he's contemplating that this is about the disobedience of an order. This isn't about that other stuff. Now, at the same time that this is happening, the judge in the Garcia case is weighing contempt. And it'll follow the same process. And Van Hollen, a member of Congress from Maryland, went down to El Salvador, and they refused to let him deal with Garcia. So you might say, I'm talking about a lot of details, which obviously I'm familiar with. And I think the key of what I do and what other people do is, if you can remember how you understood something the first time, you're in a better place to explain it, advocate it, teach it in another context. So what I would say is there are several ways to bar the door to making a decision. And cowardly judges or political judges find ways to do that. So in this case, what can we do to save the administration from not doing this right? We say, oh, Jesus, if they'd only chosen the right remedy. Habeas is the remedy, not the Administrative Procedure Act. Well, I disagree, and perhaps they're both applicable and they're good alternatives. But this is how the Supreme Court compromises going forward. Now then, why were so many on the decision? Because what they said that redeemed the Supreme Court opinion was that those in custody have to have a right to be aware of the charges and an opportunity to be heard before they can continue as detainees. So this is a major constitutional confrontation. It's very sympathetic. I think both cases are. The number of detainees that never should have left America, Garcia, whom the government admits was an error, should never be in custody, particularly the place where he was not under any circumstances to be. And like teenagers with bullshit explanations, the dog ate my lunch kind of stuff, they, homework, I know. I guess maybe I need a snack. So what we have is, we have a court that tries to bend to preserve a legacy as if they're a legitimate court, supreme in every respect. And we have a court that then gives the devil his due, finds a way to say, oh, they just made the wrong remedy. It is not a big deal. Well, it is a big deal because process is outcome determinative, meaning if I have a process that favors what I want to have happen, it's outcome determinative. In this case, the outcome they want is that the government not be seen in violation of the Constitution or statutes and so forth. But they blunder along, and really all they get is some sort of deniability, and they get it outside the courtroom because the judge and the people and players in the courtroom, they know exactly what's going on. So if you or I were in court, we're sitting at counsel table, we'd be saying, start the hearings. We'll put on live witnesses, and we'll take depositions, and we'll prove to this court that the detainees were violated. And in the companion case by another judge, same thing. And this is how we move and resist the efforts to destroy the best aspects of this republic. You know, people get upset when, and I'm not saying it's not righteous, they get upset when they see works of art smeared and so forth. And as I enjoy and prefer and mix in occasionally over the years, painting, sketching, and things like that, I certainly appreciate the art I see. But it's like they're taking axes and guns and fire and hate and an instinct to hurt and harm and to isolate and to cast our government into winners and losers, the winners being the white and the wealthy, and everybody else is at risk. It's not tolerable. It's not acceptable. So think as you will tonight of how there are at least two judges that put themselves on the line and are fighting for us. And they and more people will fight for us. And Van Hollen was fighting for us when he went down to make a show of the fact of refusing a representative of the person in custody, denying that person access to Mr. Garcia. It's a shame and a disgrace. But that's Trump's America. So we have to erase that stain from our history And when we finally get rid of him, his name everywhere should be blotted out, destroyed. Any picture of him, any statue of him, anything that refers to his existence on this planet should be obliterated. It's a good start, don't you think? So I hope to talk to you tomorrow from the Cathedral of Trees, where we sometimes worship with vengeance. Bye-bye.